Thank you for joining us for this episode of our In Conversation series. The aim of the series is to provide an insight on topical issues relevant to higher education from a university perspective. This is part of our Discover University programme, and we encourage you to follow our Twitter handle at DiscoverUniEXE, which provides regular updates for teachers and advisors. My name is Karl and Katherine. I'm the school's relationship manager. I'm joined by Catherine Lloyd-Clark, who's the Assistant Director with responsibility for student access, recruitment and admissions. Each session will aim to focus on a different theme, and this week we're focusing on last week's A-level results. So hi Catherine, thanks for joining us today. We're going to look back at last week and look back at A-level results. I guess the first thing I'll ask is, what's your reflection on results day last Thursday?
Well, Carl, my goodness, it was something of a roller coaster ride, and I'm sure my colleagues out there in schools and colleges across the country will agree that it was, I think, the most extraordinary confirmation and clearing period I can remember in 24 years of doing them. I've missed one confirmation and clearing in that 24-year career in admissions. Only because I was on maternity leave, actually, and that was a busy year. But this was unbelievable. The range of different queries that were coming in on the phone lines and on our live chat. Fielding contacts from teachers and advisors who were, upset, bemused, shocked, horrified, confused, all the range of different emotions. And trying desperately within that to find some means of, supporting the applicants who were contacting us and just wanting to tell us their particular story. And I think we're still in that process now. I think people need to be listened to and understood individually for the different circumstances they've had, because for all the talk of algorithms and all the data crunching that's gone on, my abiding reflection is that there have indeed been some genuine individual tragedies in this process. And it breaks my heart that there will be young people out there who feel that the results they received were such a poor reflection of their potential that they have to take a year perhaps and come back again in 2021.
Yeah, and over the last few days, we've seen several reports about trends with applications. Looking from Exeter particularly, what trends have we been able to see in relation to those successful applications?
Well, actually, this has been a remarkably successful period for Exeter in terms of both the process of how we've managed the results and the outcomes from it in terms of the entrants we've accepted. We went into the confirmation and clearing period with a bigger firm accept pool of home undergraduates. So what we do at Exeter, what we have to offer was clearly very, very popular by that adjusted June deadline. And also, we'd seen a lift in the predicted attainment of our student intake. So a higher proportion of those in that firm accept pool were predicted higher grades in terms of 3As or equivalent. So we were expecting our confirmation to be, positive because of those things. But then when you add to that, I guess at a national level, the slight lift in A and A star grades, that gave us a further boost. And so we were able to reduce our expectations in terms of clearing vacancies, and more of our places were filled by those who had originally applied to Exeter, either because they automatically met their conditions or because we were able to adjust our requirements a little bit and accept them with slightly lower grades. And of course, we worked really, really hard to do that because we wanted to be able to help as many of those students who had been committed to us all along as we possibly could. So, for example, we endeavoured, where it was possible because of space, to accept people with what we call compensating grades. So if our requirements were, for example, ABB, but somebody had got a slightly different profile, like an A star, a B and a C, we were able to be flexible. We have seen an increase in the proportion of students we expect to take from the most underrepresented neighbourhoods in terms of the polar classification. We don't quite know how that data will land for the final full entrant cohort, but as of today, those figures are looking stronger. So we have a more diverse, a more socially diverse group of students coming to us, which is hugely welcome. So there are some real positives within the trends we've seen at Exeter, and those are really welcome. But I still don't want to say that wipes out the sense that this has been a very difficult year for some individual students. And I accept that we've not been able to help absolutely everyone. I wish we could have done, but with the student number control in place and with capacity limits at the university, it simply wasn't possible.
And you mentioned there the student number control. That is a control placed by government on universities that stipulates how many students we can take every year or this year.
Yes, so the government gave us a maximum figure that we could work to. It will be very interesting to see what happens to the student number control from here on out, because I think the response nationally to the results in England, the existing situation with Scotland, and the change that's been made by Nicola Sturgeon's administration there, will mean that really, for practical purposes, the student number control is a very difficult concept now, and with appeals coming through, those appeals will all be outside of the student number control. But nevertheless, I think government's going to have to really look at whether that control means anything in the current climate now.
Yeah. So you've spoken there a little bit about appeals, and it's a topic I wanted to touch upon. We've seen various reports about students who are naturally upset if they haven't been given the sort of grades they were expecting, and some students indicating that they wish to submit and make appeals, which in England need to be done through the school, whereas in Scotland is slightly different. How does this work? What is the process? We know that just before you start sort of with the commentary, we know that the announcement will come later on this week. So there'll be an announcement on how exactly that appeal process happens. But from the university point of view, what does that process look like?
Yeah, so it's going to be very interesting to see what the detail is that comes out later this week, and we don't know at this point. Of course, I really feel for school and college colleagues who are going to be in the thick of GCSE results shortly, as well as trying to deal with the fallout still from the A-level results situation. So immensely difficult. We've worked very hard to underline to individual students who've contacted us that there isn't an individual appeal process in England, and that as far as we understand it, the appeals are going to have to be conducted through the assessment centre. And we don't know at this stage how the triple lock that was announced right before A-level results day will be baked into that appeals process. I think the government's original ideas about the appeals process are probably going to have to be adjusted based on what's happened over the last week, and they will presumably want to endeavour to rectify some of the individual tragedies I've referred to. Cases, for example, that we've heard about where rankings within class rankings seem to have been flagrantly ignored, and students with a class ranking of 2 and an estimated outcome of an A star have ended up with a C, where students on ranking position 5 or 6 were given Bs. those sort of situations seem to me wholly untenable, and a review of some of that is clearly going to be required. I suspect there will have to be some review of the impact on large providers, because it's extremely regrettable that the outcomes for large tertiary centres, FE colleges, are what they are. And for subjects that have larger numbers of entries, the process has been different from those with much smaller entries. And again, that's introduced very obvious unfairness, which I think there's going to have to be some attempt to rectify. From the university's perspective, we're going to work very much within the dates that the government has asked us to. So we will be guaranteeing that students who receive an appeal outcome that then means that they meet our requirements by the 7th of September will be able to come. We're going a little bit further than the government's requirements after that, in that we will endeavour, where we have space to do so, to accept students who exactly meet our conditions by the 2nd of October. They will be able to start this autumn as well. And after that, because if we don't have physical capacity and space to accept someone after that, we will be looking to extend a guarantee in relation to a place for 2021. So that's our current position.
Okay. So in relation to that, earlier on you were talking about how we had a successful recruitment and confirmation period. And obviously one of the questions that many students will have is that, are those places still available? So do we still have places for students who may go through the appeal process and then find their grades all of a sudden change again? Can they still come back to us, and will we be able to provide them with places on their chosen courses?
So we manage our numbers very, very carefully, and we've tried to ensure that there should be that capacity down to the 7th of September. We're used to seeing some numbers come in and some numbers go out at this time of year, and there are other things going on in the data that for example, perhaps we don't necessarily anticipate that EU students will be able to reach us in time in the same way as they normally would, so they won't be necessarily so many numbers coming from that source. So we think that we should have that capacity down to the 7th of September, but bearing in mind that term is actually starting in the middle of September, things do get quite tight after that, and we are already very full in many areas, and of course we're coping with social distancing for things like laboratory programs this year as well. So there are limits to what we can do, and we have to be practical. We also have to be mindful that at Exeter we deliver an outstanding student experience, and we wouldn't for the world put the quality of that student experience on the line. So we will need to work with each individual case really to work out what is the best thing to be done. We're keeping a record where students tell us that they are likely to be the subject of an appeal. And so we will be able to contact those students and give them further updates as our position on that evolves.
And just to clarify, that flexibility that we have is applicable across all our courses?
So it's applicable down to the 7th of September across all our courses. After that, effectively, it will depend on whether there is space available, and that will vary greatly discipline by discipline. Although in reality, I think that the chances are, as I can see things right now, and the data can always change, but I think we will continue to be very, very full. So it may be the case that we are having to talk to people about coming in 2021. And obviously, for subjects like medicine, if we've had that appeal result after the 7th of September and we really don't have places because medicine numbers are regulated in a different way in addition to the student number control, we know how keen people are, to gain entry to a course like medicine. We will then need to talk to individuals about whether 2021 is really the right option for them. And we will make some concessions, for example, not requiring another round at the UCAT test and using the interview record from this year so that we don't have to put people through, the whole round of interviews again. So that guarantee is there for everyone down to the 7th. And after that, it really does depend on space being available and us having the ability to offer that place. Given other numbers targets that we have to work to.
Okay. Let's move on to next year's applicants. So the current year 12s going into year 13 next year. And obviously we've seen some concerns from some students about the possible implication of having students roll over, fall into next year's application cycle. What do you see as the implications for those students from university side?
I still think, as I said earlier this year, Karl, when we had one of our other conversations, I still think that Exeter, this will largely be okay. I think we have the capacity within our typical kind of admissions context to accommodate some increased demand because there is, there's a chunk of people from, as it were, 2020 who have, for whatever reason, postponed or deferred and want to come in 2021. And we can cope with them and the 2021 cohort, pretty well. We'll have to see whether there is an impact for regulated courses like medicine, but I'm seriously hoping that the government wants to have a look at how many doctors it wants to recruit going forward, and that there will be some flexibility and positivity around enabling people to have those sort of careers going forward. So, medicine, I've got a little bit of a question mark over. It's possible that it could become more competitive, but I hope that everyone across the sector will be looking at making sure that, the current year 12s are not disadvantaged by what's happened. Clearly, there are, different contexts at every single other university. And I can't really speak for my colleagues in other institutions, but I think for Exeter, we can accommodate that lift in demand if it does indeed materialise that way. And I really hope that, year 12 don't suffer for what's happened, because my personal opinion is that whilst year 13 have had a huge amount to contend with the results period, year 12 have had a huge amount of disruption to their teaching and learning. And I really hope the government is going to look at some mitigation beyond what they've already announced, which I think is far too little for the current situation in relation to year 12.
Okay. We'll delve deeper into the implications for year 12 students in a future episode. But Katherine, for today, thank you very much for that insight. And thank you for listening. We'll be running further sessions, so please do follow us on Twitter @DiscoverUniEXE for further updates on future sessions. Thank you.